Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ebony Man 2K, aka that Jolly Rancher, aka Pretty Ricky, what they call me, and aka the original king of receipts. I welcome you to my channel. Today I will address the controversial YouTuber Hannah Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things, who has recently come under scrutiny for the mishandling of an invited racist guest named Nick Fuentes on her YouTube show. Her lack of pushback on this Holocaust and slavery denier raised eyebrows across YouTube, especially when you consider other questionable racist behavior of Pearl in the past. Now, before I begin, let me send a shout out to some of my fellow YouTubers who have been investigating this story and holding Pearl accountable for her actions. Those YouTubers include Mike TV, Oshay Duke Jackson, and the YouTube duo Trigonometry. Now make sure you visit their YouTube channels and subscribe. Now, in full disclosure, I am also a part-time YouTuber investigating this Pearly situation by request of my followers. I have work experience at a top-tier global management consulting firm with Fortune 500 companies. So producing investigative presentations like the one I'm doing on Hannah Pearl Davis is par for the course. Now, if you look to the right of the screen, you should see a list of the important claims made about the YouTuber Just Pearly Things. And I will read the list as follows. Number 1, Pearl's rise in YouTube came on the heels of the death of former YouTuber Kevin Samuels. Pearl currently fills the vacuum as the white girl version of Kevin. Number 2, in a recent interview, Pearl did not make an attempt to push back on comments made by Holocaust and slavery denier Nick Fuentes. Number 3, Pearl purposely employs colonizing tactics in working contracts with blacks on her staff, after first pretending to be unaware of the history of colonization. Number 4, Pearl's new management also represents conservative activist Candace Owens, and Pearl is working collaboratively with the alt-right, pushing their talking points and agenda on her platform. Now I will show detailed receipts of all 4 claims in this presentation. As I mentioned before, I am the original king of receipts, with over 5 years of experience in investigative work on YouTube for shits and giggles, and over 20 years of work experience in corporate America. In this presentation, I have provided graphs to show Pearl's monthly views and monthly subs added for the past year. You will also see video clips of Pearl being interviewed about her background and then confronted about the way she handled her interview with the racist Nick Fuentes. You will also see video clips of a black member of her staff explaining how he and other blacks are being taken advantage of in working contracts with Pearl. And lastly, I will provide a detailed overview of Pearl's management team that will include resumes, profile summaries, books, articles, and interviews that clearly illustrate an obvious collaborative effort to push an agenda and talking points of the conservative right through the YouTuber Just Pearly Things. Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ebony Man 2K. Let's get it. Now, make sure you stay to the last part of this presentation about her management team, because the truth is shocking. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. Okay, we're going to start this off with graphs that show Pearl's monthly views and monthly subs added from April of last year to present day. Pearl currently has 1.4 million subs and approximately 2.6 million views per day. As I mentioned earlier, Pearl's rise in YouTube came on the heels of the death of former YouTuber Kevin Samuels. Now, it has been noted by many in the Black manosphere that Pearl currently fills the vacuum as the white girl version of Kevin. Now, Kevin Samuels died in May of 2022. The graphs above show the uptick in activity of Just Pearly Things YouTube channel soon after his death. Okay, in this first clip, you will hear an interview of Pearl by the YouTube duo Trigonometry. These two gentlemen do a fantastic job of asking the right questions and holding Pearl accountable for not pushing back on comments made by Holocaust and slavery denier Nick Fuentes on her recent show. Now, let's see how Pearl responds to these two interviewers.
Brilliant guest today is a fellow YouTuber who started her show a year ago and is now on over 1 million subscribers. Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things. Welcome to Trigonometry.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's awesome. Thanks so much for coming. It's great to have you on. As I just bigged you up, you've absolutely smashed it. Before we get into all of that, tell everybody, who are you? How are you where you are? What's been the journey through life that leads you to be sitting here talking to us?
So, my name's Pearl. I'm a YouTuber. I'm from Chicago. I live in London. I do a YouTube show here.
That was quick.
Yeah.
How did you decide to start it? How did you have the idea? You could tell everybody what the show is, because a lot of people wouldn't have seen it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
So we talk about a lot of men's issues. So I feel like most media today is catered towards women, pandering towards women. We don't do that on my channel.
You don't pander to women.
No, we're not about that. And
you pander to men.
Not pander. Look it. I say things that are true.
Okay.
I say things that are like basic to me, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But
like what?
You shouldn't get super fat after you get married just because you got a ring. I mean, I feel like that's basic. Women in the 1950s knew that. But today, I'm a bully. I'm the meanest person ever. Blah blah. So yeah, that's what I do. Is we talk about relationships on my show, and so we bring in men and women to talk about different like relationship topics, and then we go back and forth.
Yeah.
And then I also work a lot with the court system here. I'm doing a documentary on men getting custody of their kids.
Interesting.
Yeah. But
Okay, hold up. Wait a minute, ladies and gentlemen. Hannah Pearl just lied. She just lied, y'all. In her introduction about herself and background, she claimed that she was from Chicago, Illinois. Chicago, Illinois. Now I want you to take a good look at Hannah Pearl on screen right now. Does she look like she is from some hot city chick with a cosmopolitan vibe and look from Chicago? Look at her right now. Does she look like city folk or country folk? Well, she's country folk. Hannah Pearl Davis is not from Chicago, Illinois. Let me show you where she's from. If you look on screen now, you will see the high school volleyball profile of Hannah Pearl Davis. Pearl was a middle hitter her senior year at Marion Central Catholic High School, located in Huntley, Illinois. Hannah Pearl Davis is from a small town in Illinois called Huntley, which is an hour or so drive from Chicago. Huntley, Illinois ain't got shit to do with Chicago, Illinois. Those are two different worlds. As I spoke before, Hannah Pearl Davis doesn't even look like somebody from Chicago. She has no swag, she's pasty, and she does not have a city girl look to her. She has a country girl look to her. And the reason why she has a country girl look to her is because she's from the country. Hannah Pearl Davis is from Huntley, Illinois, not Chicago, Illinois.
yeah. But one of the things you did with your show, and I don't know if you were one of the first ones, but it's definitely a format that's really skyrocketed. I can't open my Twitter now without, 8 people sitting around the table having some discussion. Often they don't know what they're talking about, but it's a format of bringing kind of random people together, partly random.
Very random.
Very random.
Very random, yeah.
And you also have famous people, and we'll talk about that as well. But did you come up with that? Was that something that you saw other people doing?
No, I would say Fresh and Fit in Miami were probably the first ones to do that. So I went on their show. And what I liked about London is it was one of the most diverse places I've ever lived.
Yeah.
So I just thought it'd be cool to bring everyone in a room and talk about something that we all have in common, which is relationships.
That's very interesting. And so, but why do you pick the subjects that you do? Why are you drawn to the subjects that you discuss? Because they are controversial, they can get you into hot water, etc.
I follow what interests me, and I just thought those subjects were interesting. It wasn't, a lot of people think it's a lot more drawn out. Every week I'm just oh, that's an interesting topic, and we go for it. I would say it's a mix of relationships. Sometimes we add in some conservative stuff, but it's mostly about relationships.
And why does that interest you, Paul? In particular, do you feel that relationships are in crisis now? Or we don't value relationships, or we look at relationships
I
in the
just
wrong
think
way?
men aren't allowed to have standards in society. And that's just the one thing I noticed. Whenever men say that they want something in a relationship, women always shame them for it. And I just thought it was so interesting how we never talk about the men's point of view. So when I first started, I started introducing my friends to certain types of content. So I would be well, have you ever thought about this way, or have you ever thought about that way? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, that's kind of how it started.
Right, so men are shamed for having standards. What do you mean by that? Let's just unpick that a little bit.
Okay, so what do we have? We have fat shaming.
Mm-hmm.
If a guy says, I want a girl in shape, oh, he's fat shaming. Oh, if a guy says, I don't want the town whore, then he's slut shaming. If he says, I don't want to, it's anytime a guy demands something out of a relationship, or he's labeled as controlling. And I just got, oh my gosh, I got so tired in the past year. I got so tired. Because I just feel we would talk about basic things, and the men would say basic things that they wanted, and they would just continue to be shamed for it. And it's just one of those things, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
So what are the basic things? And look, a lot of people have said you use, let's put it fruity language, as they would say in the 1950s in England, like the town whore.
Oh yeah.
You should have said the city hall.
The city hall. But,
yeah.
But so what do you mean by that?
I think we know what you mean by that.
Whore?
Yeah. No. But let's talk. What does that mean? Because
sleeping. Okay, I met one girl. She told me this was off camera. She didn't tell me this on camera. Girl, because we had a pro-life show. Girls had 7 abortions.
Wow.
7. She's 28. It's madness. You can't tell me that's not madness.
Right.
And so we're just in this world where it's girls are doing this crazy, crazy stuff. And if anyone has anything to say about it, we're the bad guys. It's just don't put me in that group.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because I think a lot of people, including a lot of women, would be you've had 7 abortions. I mean, even if you're pro-choice, you'd sort of not be on board with that, most people.
You would be surprised.
Well, you think a lot of people are on board with that?
Maybe not on board, but legally.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I hear it's free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And do you think that these particular women don't take responsibility for their actions? Do you think it's society?
Why would, it's we live in a world where women are bailed out of every single bad decision we make. If we want to sleep around, there's birth control. If birth control doesn't work, there's abortion. If the girl does get pregnant and wants to keep it, she can put the dude on child support and not let him see the kids. A guy gets 6 days a month, maybe, if he's lucky. On top of that, if that doesn't go well, they can give it up for adoption. It's women are always bailed out of every bad decision we make. I heard here they gave you free housing if you're a single mother. What incentive do we have to make good decisions if we get free shit from the government for making bad decisions?
it's a good point. But then surely isn't the system at fault rather than the individual, Pearl?
Why?
Both. I mean, I think the system's at fault for like allowing them to do that, but I mean, I think your life is your own fault.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me a girl had 7 abortions, that's not her fault.
No.
Like, come on.
I agree. That's why I was surprised.
Yeah.
Francis always likes to blame the system because he's an old school lefty.
Yeah.
Everything's about the system.
No, I mean, I would say it's okay. There's good people and bad people, but if you have a system that allows bad people to get away with the bad things that they do, then of course, the system's at fault too. However, like your own life is your own fault. So I kind of see both sides when it comes to that.
Yeah. And are these your politics that inform your worldview? Do you have a political outlook on life?
I would say I'm like more conservative, but like, no, it's just what I see in front of me, like, to be honest.
You're not that's the sense I get from you. You're not ideological. You just go, that's stupid, that doesn't work, etc. Right? That's my take on it. That's my sense of you.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you were going to say something else there. No.
So, that being the case, we can all agree that America is right-leaning, more right-leaning than the UK.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why
I'm not a diehard politics person.
But I think that's a pretty standard viewpoint. So
Right.
so why the UK then, Pearl, as opposed to America?
Oh, I'll tell you why. So I didn't mean to end up here. Yeah, I didn't mean to. It was like an accident. So I, before YouTube, was playing semi-pro, or I was playing, no, sorry, I need to start over. So when I got out of college, I was selling copiers. And I decided that I wanted to play volleyball overseas. I was going to try to get a pro contract. And I was recruited to play volleyball here. So it was a year program to get my master's. And at the end of the year, you hypothetically get a pro contract, which I did with the YouTube stuff. So I kind of I started the show when I got here, and I didn't expect it to get huge. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So then I kind of just got stuck here because I was I'd have to move my producer, and it was just, I mean, you know how it is if you guys wanted to move this whole operation, what a headache it would be.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, imagine. So I'd have to, I'm the voltage converters. So I kind of accidentally ended up here, but I am going to leave eventually.
Are you?
Yeah.
I can see why. I don't think your opinions are that widely shared in this country.
No, they love me here.
Listen, there's something else. I think it's been we call the show trigonometry.
Yeah.
But even by our standards, this has been pretty triggering for a lot of people. However, there's something even more triggering that I do have to ask you about, because in between the time that we booked you to come on the show and you actually coming on the show, you had a guy called Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, Nick.
Yeah. And then you did an interview with this guy. This is not a guy we would ever have on because he's a racist, Holocaust denying piece of shit as far as I'm concerned. But you had him on, and then you took that interview down and apologized. So what happened with that whole thing?
Oh, I can't talk too much. There's legal things going on.
There's legal things going on.
Yeah, there's not with Nick, but just but there's I have a video coming out about that whole thing. So
You do?
You guys have to wait for the video.
Well,
but I will say I did not find Nick to be racist. My staff actually did not find him to be racist.
Wait, he was talking to an Italian girl next to you and saying that she shouldn't have a black boyfriend or something along those lines.
He doesn't believe in. See, I don't really want to go into the race mixing stuff too much.
No, but you just said he wasn't being racist, and I watched him be racist on your show.
Well, I mean, to me, he says the same things that there's a lot of people that think like that.
But doesn't make it less racist just because other people think it.
You could say that, but to me, it's how do I put it? His argument is more about culture. It's easier if you date someone in your culture. You'd have to watch the full thing, but was being a bit combative to him. And to me, he was just kidding. But yeah,
He did say, I am a bit racist, even in that. And in fact, in your apology, you said that he said racist things.
Well, there's a video coming out about all of that, but you'll see. It's coming out.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm asking you is because it's kind of like a big deal that you had this guy on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
He is incredibly toxic.
I'm just telling you my personal experience with him. We filmed hours and hours and hours of footage with him. There was that one to me, if you watch the full clip, it puts it in a little bit of context.
Yeah.
But he was really polite. He showed up on time. Yeah.
He also
and honestly, he did a panel and he spoke about his opinions on race mixing, and a lot of people agreed with him.
Okay, but that doesn't change whether it's racist or not, right? But what I'm getting
Do you think it's racist to because I'm curious.
Yeah.
Do you think it's racist if I'm Irish and I say I want to date someone that's Irish? Do you think that's racist?
No, but if I say to you, you're Irish, therefore you shouldn't date a black man, that is racist, yeah.
If you're Irish because when he spoke about it on the show, it was more about culture than race.
Mm. But to me, that doesn't really work as an argument, Paul. So I'll give you an example. I'm half Latin American. I take after my dad's Irish side. If I date a Jamaican woman, Jamaica and Venezuela have a very similar culture. We're culturally very similar. We have the same food, the same religion, whatever else. So to me, that argument doesn't work. Do you see what I'm saying?
Wait, Venezuela and what?
And Jamaica. So Venezuela's at the top of South America, and Jamaica is all Trinidad, which is literally, you see it over the water.
Yeah, well, it's just, when he was talking about how he wanted to date an Italian woman. Versus, he even said he wouldn't want to date a British girl, he'd want to date an Italian woman. So it's how is he a white supremacist?
No, he's allowed to date who he wants,
Yeah.
but him telling your Italian friend she shouldn't be dating a black man, that's the racist part, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. I have to remember what he said in the clip, but maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking you, because you do have controversial guests, as we do, and there's nothing wrong with talking to people who are controversial, but Nick Fuentes is a very different kettle of fish, as we say here, right?
Yeah. My opinion is that he was polite overall. He was a good guest.
He was also denying the Holocaust, from what I remember.
Look, I'm not with that. Keep me out of that one. I'm not with the race. That's not my thing. But I just think people are allowed to have their opinions. So if he has crazy opinions, let him have his opinions. And I think he should be allowed to talk about it on a podcast.
But isn't it also the duty, Pearl, of the person interviewing them to push back on those opinions when they come up and actually challenge them and investigate them and to basically push back on it?
Yeah, we could do another show where we push back more. It's not the end all be all.
But surely isn't that the risk?
I wanted to do one with Dr. Umar, but he didn't want to come. Sad.
Who's Dr. I don't know who that is.
Dr. Umar has the same opinions as Nick. He doesn't believe in race mixing too. He's just black.
Yeah.
That's a common. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some people who believe that, sure.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about the Holocaust with him, he was saying it's like slavery, it got embellished, and you were sort of going, I can see your point. And that's what I found a bit confusing, because then in your apology you said, well, I wasn't really educated on these things. But it sounds like you're kind of taking that back now.
There's a statement coming out on everything, so you guys just have to wait for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
From our perspective, we're kind of saying to you what we thought you might have said to him, which is, if a guest says or does something controversial, you kind of want to ask and find out why they've done that. And we have to make, by the way, if this is coming across as confrontational, that's not the intention at all, because whenever I see a guest not be challenged enough on someone's show, I often think, there, but by the grace of God go I, because we've had people on the show who've said controversial things, and I've sort of missed the moment. And I kind of didn't challenge them enough, and I felt bad about it afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, because you're not a political person, you might not. There was a guy called Darren Grimes who had a guy called Dr. David Starkey on, and he said something about how, of course, slavery wasn't genocide, otherwise there wouldn't be so many damn blacks in the West, right? And that got picked up by all the media, and they all had to go at him. And I just saw a fairly young, inexperienced interviewer in Darren failed to challenge someone who he looked up to and respected on what was just a bad phrasing more than anything, right? So I totally understand why you may have missed something or not have jumped in on something that you maybe felt that you should have jumped in on. But the reason that Francis and I would never have Nick Fuentes on is precisely because he says all that shit all the time. So if you were to actually challenge him on some of his abhorrent views, you'd spend the entire 3 hours doing that.
Did you watch the full video?
I watched some of it, not the full video. Yeah.
Okay. I did challenge him at points of it.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
tell us about
Yeah,
that.
tell us.
I mean, we had a whole panel on race mixing.
Yeah.
And like we had, like that was why he came out. Like the political stuff was just because he was there. Like, so I did a one-on-one as like the reason I brought him on was I saw him on No Jumper, like talking about race mixing. And I've heard that point of view, but it's usually like not, people look different that have that point of view usually. So like I've heard it, but I've just never heard it like that, I guess. So we just brought him on a panel just like about race mixing, and they did a whole panel on it.
But then he was denying the Holocaust.
You know, that was crazy. That was.
But that's what he does. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, but we brought him on to talk about race mixing. That's what we brought him on, because it's a relationship show, and then we just interviewed him because he was there.
But there will be people, Pearl, who will say, well, if you're going to bring that person on, and look, again, this isn't to, misrepresent or do any of those types of things. The reason we have this show is so we can talk and have honest conversations, because part of this is for me to clarify my thinking about different issues. That's why we do the show. But part of it is also when you bring someone on, you can't also ignore that element of it. Do you see what I mean?
I just don't know what you mean by ignore.
No, because if you're not addressing the fact that he's a Holocaust denier, then you're ignoring that. Do you see what I mean?
I mean, I don't agree that the Holocaust didn't happen.
Yeah, no,
that's reassuring. Yeah, good.
I mean, I was just listening to him.
Yeah.
And I think you're allowed to listen to people that you might not agree with. And I think as women, we're more agreeable than men. So a lot of times you might take it as me agreeing. But no, I didn't.
Well, you did say, so it's kind of like slavery, it's been embellished.
I was talking about how people use atrocities to control people. And I was quoting Thomas Sowell, who's a Black author. Who
I'm
I'm
a big fan of Thomas Sowell.
Yeah, so I was quoting Thomas Sowell and speaking about his ideas if people watch the full interview.
Yeah.
And I said that in the interview.
Yeah.
And I was talking about how people use an atrocity to control people.
Yeah. So, but you don't think that's what happened with the Holocaust?
It sounded like it based on what he was saying, but
he's a well-known Holocaust denier. Of course, it would sound like that.
That's where I was feeling.
Sorry,
let me
forgive me.
finish. At the time, that's what I was talking about. It sounded like some of Thomas Sowell's ideas, but do I think that the Holocaust didn't happen? No, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I guess what do you think your responsibility is when you bring on controversial guests onto the show? Do you have any responsibility? What do you believe?
For the guests?
No, not for the guests. For the content that you put out, Pearl.
Yeah, I'm responsible for all the content I put out.
You're responsible for all the content that you put out. And do you now look at that and think you shouldn't have done that? You made a mistake. You made an error.
I don't regret having someone controversial on. If I had to do it again, I would have maybe had someone on the opposite end of the argument that could push back. But how I probably would have did it if I had to do it again, one full interview with both of them, let them talk, let them say what they're going to say, and then bring them together.
So who would you have on the other end? So you'd have
Dr. Umar.
but those are two people who share the same same viewpoint. It's just one happens to be white, one happens to be black. That's not that's playing on. Do you see that's kind of identity politics?
Well, yeah, but then we did a whole panel with people that disagreed with him, so we did do that.
In this next video clip, you will hear from one of Pearl's ex-colleagues, Sarah Garvey, who expresses his displeasure with her most recent business practices. Pearl proposes to him a new business arrangement where she will receive 70% of his earnings in exchange for his uses of her equipment and support personnel. Now, Sarah goes on to express that Pearl proposes an even higher percentage to other Black colleagues who are poor and disadvantaged. This practice of taking advantage of the poor to obtain wealth and personal gain is what he and many others would consider to be immoral and of the colonizing mindset.
Now, I've been on social media for a while, and I have done interviews with the likes of Tommy Robinson, Sargon of Akkad, politicians like Lee Jasper, and also Lin May and people from the music industry like So Solid, Mega Man to be exact. Now, Pearl was reacting to my content prior to coming to the UK. And so when she came to the UK, I was very interested in the content that she would actually put out. And it just so happened that she was putting out content that I was interested in, similar to what the late great Kevin Samuels actually put out. And I understand it because I myself had been embroiled in court cases and things of that nature when it comes to the mother of my son, and understand that the gynocentric order in which we live in is something that needs to be spoken about. So when she came to London, she said that she wanted to make a podcast. And I said, no problem. Okay, let's talk about it. And I decided to feature on her show. Now, when I featured on her show, because of my following in the UK, people would tune in. So essentially, I helped Pearl grow her channel. Okay, I was on there week to week, and I was working with her based on a fee. So the tragic death of Kevin Samuels happened, and there was a vacuum within the manosphere space. Who was it going to be filled by? It was actually filled by just Pearly Things along with other content creators. Now, I believe that the reason why this space was filled is because Kevin Samuels had a large following of black men. And these black men were essentially fed up with the way feminism had taken over their community, specifically their women. So when he died, there was a vacuum and a lot of black men looking for content like this. And it was filled by Pearl. And I believe that Pearl rose to fame because she herself was the opposite of what those men had been seeing. She was a white woman. She wasn't the types of women that they had been seeing. And essentially, she was regurgitating Kevin Samuels' content. So I began working with Pearl, and from the beginning, I started to think that maybe this girl has a colonial mindset. Now, we all know that we don't want to be paranoid, so I kept working with her. However, the more I worked with her is the more that I saw. She had a colonial type viewpoint when it came to black people. And I had to school her a few times on what it was like to be black and the black experience, and also what slavery and colonization was actually like.
Do you think that historical catastrophes must be compensated for?
No.
No.
That's stupid.
So then, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing.
Yeah.
So then, how come there were groups of people that got compensation then?
How come?
For instance, like Jewish people, Chinese people, Japanese people with the bombs. Like there were groups of people who got compensated.
I don't know.
So it wasn't fair.
What? Well, I'm talking about like when I think about group, I think about reparations. So I mean, maybe if the people were still alive today, like I don't know, maybe. But like when you said historical, I thought you meant like in the past, not the present.
Yeah, so like in the past, so like people talk about slavery. So in the past, you know, the Holocaust happened. In the past, you know, the Japanese, but people got compensated for it.
Yeah.
There's a book, right, called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And when you read that book, you realize that the whole Industrial Revolution and stuff like that was started because of the colonization. And you just think, well, if you didn't do that, then you wouldn't be as successful.
So what do you mean by the colonization?
So the colonization of Africa, so both the people and the resources, right? There's a direct correlation between the colonization of Africa and the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
And so with all the metals and the rubber and all this kind of stuff coming from Africa, it fueled the Industrial Revolution of the West.
Wait, so you're saying like in Africa, when you say colonize, you're saying like did England come in and colonize?
Yeah, like so European, France, Spain, Portugal, England.
And they like enslaved Africans, and
Yes.
that's what you're saying. Okay.
So they enslaved and at least colonized the continent.
Okay.
So when you colonize a continent and then you take ownership of the resources, you're able to gather those resources together and use them to your own benefit.
Right.
And so you gather those resources, use them to your own benefit, and build up your economy.
Right.
All the while messing up the economy of that actual country.
Right.
So that video was filmed in 2022. And in that video, what you saw was me attempting to tell Pearl and show Pearl what colonization was like. How people went to another group of people and took their resources and took what was theirs and built their empire off of it. So when Pearl now plays like she doesn't know what colonization is, and she doesn't know what slavery is, and she says these insensitive statements, in that video, I actually attempted to give her a book. It was called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. I've read it myself. She semi-dismissed that book. She kind of dismissed that book. And then she went on with herself to go and interview a man like Nick Fuentes. Pearl has Africans that work for her. Now, Nigeria has many issues. Now, the disparity in Nigeria has rich and poor people living just on the breadline. And Pearl has these types of people working for her. They edit her videos. They make her thumbnails.
So look what I have here. This is evidence to show how hard my Americans work.
No, hold on. You forgot, yeah? This is how hard my white Americans work.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
They're very hard workers.
Yes.
I like how they work. My white Americans really work hard. You see that?
They inspire us to work hard.
No. Do you know what? They don't even inspire. They're working hard for themselves, bro.
Oh, okay.
You know, they're putting in a lot of work, yeah? They put in a lot of work. My white white Americans
You guys should
work hard.
Work hard.
Yeah, you could.
So Pearl has taken people on from Africa, which on the surface looks like a good thing. And I guess it is. Africans are being fed. They're taking money from her. They are feeding their family. Amazing. However, with a colonial mindset, this can be quite dangerous. And what happened during that interview with Nick Fuentes was that she used an age-old tactic that colonizers use, which was the divide and rule tactic. She pitted African Americans versus Africans when she spoke about how hard Africans work compared to how hard African Americans work. And she also used the term, my Africans. Much of what Pearl says is determined by her management, which she has said to me on many occasions that she shares with Candace Owens. So when you have a colonial mindset and you have a management who tell you what to say, what generally happens, in my personal point of view, and what I actually saw, was that she began to start paying people pittance. She began to start offering contracts to people that owned them, just like a colonial master would. Case in point, myself and Pearl sat down to have a conversation about me signing to her contractually. And I want to make this very clear. I have never signed to the Just Pearly Things network. I have always been an independent. Pearl has known that, and I have known that. And so anytime I worked with Pearl, we had agreed a fee, and I worked for that fee. I have never been signed to the Just Pearly Things contracts. However, she has signed a few Africans, namely King Richards and Auntie Jenny. Now, I have no problem with a King Richards or an Auntie Jenny. However, if we look at the contracts that they signed, you would understand the reason why I use the term colonization and colonial. Now, myself and Pearl sat down to have a conversation, and she expressed to me that she wanted to do a new segment for her show. In that segment, She said that she would like me to present a topical news show on a day-to-day basis. So I said, okay, no problem. Talk to me. What are we talking about? And she said she would want me within her studio 4 days per week. I said, okay, from what time? She said from 10 in the morning till 5 o'clock in the evening. And I said, okay, well, that is 7 hours. I said, so working 4 to 5 days a week for 7 hours is essentially a day job. I said to her, okay, so what is my guaranteed fee at the end of the month? What is the salary? And she looks at me and she says, we do not do guarantees and we do not do salaries. So I said, so if you don't do guarantees and you don't do salaries, what is it that you actually do? And she said she does percentages. So I said, okay, cool. Well, what's the percentage? She said, Sarah, you're the high end, so you will get 70-30. So I said, fine, okay, let me listen. 70% goes to me and 30% goes to you. Now she looked at me and she said, no, 70% goes to me, Pearl, and 30% goes to me, Sarah Garvey. And that's when I started scratching my head. And I said, hang on a minute. So are you telling me that's a high-end contract for you? And she said, yes. And I said, so are you saying that Just Pearly Things Network has other people on low-end contracts? She said, yes. I said, King Rich's and Auntie Jenny? She said, yes. I said, what's the low end? She said, it's 10 to 15%. So essentially, she could be owning 80% of the content, which is basically the monetized views on somebody's channel, and they only take home 15% of the money? She said, yes. I said, Pearl, how long are these contracts for? She said, 3 years. So I said, let me get this straight. You want to own me for 3 years to take 70% of my ad revenue, keep me in your studio from 10 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the evening for 4 to 5 days a week, and you are not guaranteeing me any money? I said respectfully, for what reason would I work for your company? She said, because we have a great studio and we have great lighting and we have great editors that will edit your stuff down. Now, I may be a lot of things, but I'm not an idiot. I may be cool, I may be calm, I may be collected, but I'm not a fool. And essentially, the colonial mindset of Pearl has people working on her quote-unquote plantation for absolute pittance, when a year ago, I suggested to her to look into exactly what colonization was, and she acted dumb.
Guys, people say that stuff about me. They say I'm sexist. They say I'm a misogynist. And, you know, I really just like to give people the benefit of the doubt when I interview them. I don't go into interviews trying to interrogate someone. I just more try to listen and see where they're coming from. In hindsight, that wasn't smart. And in hindsight, I should have had someone, you know, maybe Sarah Garvey, maybe another content creator that could have pushed back more and really was more educated on the topics that he was talking about than I was, because I certainly was not an expert in any of the stuff that he was talking about.
Now we're about to move to the last part of my presentation, where I report my findings on Pearl's management team. I will start off with her advisor, Gina Florio Bontempo. Gina is a Harvard grad and an experienced conservative journalist working for major media publications. She is also an author of the book called The Lies of Modern Feminism. In this book, Gina explains how she graduated from Harvard University as an angry atheist taught to hate America, so much that she abandoned her birth country for Australia. When a freak accident sent her back to the U.S., a video by Candace Owens, then others by Dave Rubin and PragerU, opened her eyes to the lies she had been believing all of those terrible years. Now, let's listen to a clip of an interview done with Gina on The Candace Owens Show. And I want you to notice how some of her expressions, thoughts, and sentiment are similar to those of Hannah Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things.
This one always makes people laugh, but that's why I try to use humor, because I mean it. I'm a person who, I was raised in a conservative Christian household. My parents were always very patriotic, and I was raised to love our country. But the second I got into university, I spent 4 years in college and 2 years in graduate school. I came out on the other side, a very different young lady who deeply hated America. And I left the United States, and I said I was never coming back. This country is racist and rotten to its core. And so I moved to South America, and I went to Australia for a while, shaved half my head, swore off capitalism, said that the free market was evil. And I went down a deep, dark hole that I think that I see a lot of young millennials and Gen Z in right now. And that deep, dark hole is, like I say, the depths of leftism, where we're really taught to hate our country. We're taught to hate white people. We're taught to think that capitalism is evil. And so I always tell people, if I am able to come back from that, if I'm able to come back from deeply hating America and swing back to being one of the most America-loving patriots there is, anybody can. And so I use that as a message of hope. Also, not only for people who are currently leftists, but also for family members who might see their daughter, their son, their sister, their brother, or even just a friend who is so far to the left. I always give them hope that there is a chance for them to come back.
Well, that leads to the next question, because, I'm Gen X. You guys are millennials. You and Candace Owens, millennials, the biggest generation in our country right now. And so I think every parent or grandparent is out there who may have a situation like you're describing is going, how do I reach them? And how are you and Candace able to team up to reach maybe some of these young minds who have been poisoned, I would argue, by the government-run education system and higher education?
Well, I think the very first thing is that people like Candace Owens, content producers like PragerU, Daily Wire, The Rubin Report, I think first and foremost, what they're willing to do is have the conversations that we're not allowed to have in mainstream media. So that's why you see a lot of people who may be on the fence, people who may even consider themselves to be liberal. Once they hear Candace Owens speak, once they hear someone like Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Dave Rubin, once they hear these people interviews on their show and have people on their show who might have different viewpoints, it's just the willingness to have these conversations that may be politically incorrect. And it's the willingness to have the conversations that mainstream media will not let us have. And, I talk a lot about how the radical left is authoritarian in nature. And we see the mainstream media today as an extension of the radical left and an extension of the Democrat Party in so many ways. And the very first thing that they produce is that it is not a conversation. It's not a dialogue. It's not discourse. It's just shoving down your throat the same message over and over again. And so I think why so many people are now flocking to the other side and flocking to the Daily Wire and PragerU is because these content producers are just willing to have the conversation. They have people on their show who have different viewpoints. They're not all just staunch conservatives. They're opening up the floor to have a dialogue that we are told we're not allowed to have. And I think that invites in a lot of different people. And I think it brings more people to our side.
Okay, now you heard Gina Florio Bontempo express in that interview her conversion back to conservative ideology. You also heard her mention her relationship with Candace Owens and her references to other conservative sources like the Daily Wire. But it doesn't stop there. If you look on screen, you should see a post that I've added from her IG on June 27th, 2020, and it reads as follows. Gina says, I just got a surge of new followers, and I'm not sure why, but I'm happy to have you all here. And then she says a little about me. My day job, I managed Candace Owens and worked with Pierre Wilson on all things Blexit. We have 11 chapters across the country and 5 national events coming up, so join us. Now, if you look to the right of the page, you can see that she mentioned Pierre Wilson with Blexit, and you can see that Pierre Wilson is a major player in the Brexit movement, right? Now, for those of you who are not aware of Brexit, it is a name for black exit. Okay, black exit. That's how they came with the word Brexit. And that is black exit from the Democratic Party. So Pierre Wilson as well as Gloria are both activists in trying to influence black people to move from the Democratic Party, from the left, through a major organization, a movement called Brexit. Okay. Now, on their website, the definition of Brexit reads as follows. Brexit is the movement to drive traditional American principles into urban communities across the United States of America, to promote economic independence, individual freedom, strengthen the nuclear family, and foster a deeper appreciation for patriotism in Black American culture. We focus on shifting the culture as well as educating and uplifting minority America through educational programs and acts of community service. Okay? So that's a very nice way of saying that they're trying to get black people away from the left to the right, basically. So when you see Pearl come out of nowhere into black spaces on YouTube, it is plausible that her manager's connections to major conservative sources on the radical right, like Candace Owens, The Daily Wire, and Brexit, can easily serve as an influence on Pearl's topics, talking points, and guests, like Nick Fuentes. Okay, now that I've introduced you to one of Pearl's advisors, Gina, let me now introduce you to her manager, Kobe DeVito. Kobe plays a more active role in Just Pearly Things YouTube platform. If you look on the screen now, you can see where he sends out retweets of Pearl's postings on Twitter. Here, he retweets about episodes of Pearl's wife's school show and her announcements about recruiting talent and interesting guests for Pearl to interview on her show. Now, if you look on screen right now, you should see a copy of the resume of Kobe DeVito. Kobe holds a bachelor's degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Now, he lists content creator at YouTube as his current position, but primarily his work or his real job of the past year since July of 2019 has been with the publication The Daily Wire. He has had multiple roles at The Daily Wire as YouTube manager, social media video manager, and director of social video. But I'm raising an eyebrow because it seems like his only real job in his career has been with one employer, one publication, The Daily Wire. So let's move forward and investigate his involvement with The Daily Wire and see what the background of this publication is really about. If you look on screen now, you should see a description of The Daily Wire, with the source being Wikipedia. I will read that description as follows. The Daily Wire is an American conservative news website and media company founded in 2015 by political commentator Ben Shapiro and film director Jeremy Boring. The company is a major publisher on Facebook and produces podcasts such as The Ben Shapiro Show. In June 2022, the Daily Wire launched Daily Wire Plus, a video-on-demand platform featuring various Daily Wire content, including podcasts and video productions. The company has released multiple exclusive feature-length films and television series. The Daily Wire is based in Nashville, Tennessee. Many Daily Wire stories repackage journalism from traditional news organizations while adding a conservative slant. Fact checkers have said that some stories shared by the Daily Wire are unverified, and that the Daily Wire sometimes mistakes facts to advance a partisan view. Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Now we cooking with hot grease, y'all. We cooking with hot grease. Do you see that last paragraph? Do you see it? Listen, let me read it to you again, just in case you missed it. It says, many Daily Wire stories repackage journalism from traditional news organizations while adding a conservative slant. Fact checkers have said that some stories shared by the Daily Wire are unverified and that the Daily Wire sometimes misstates facts to advance a partisan view, y'all. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So listen, so now we can understand where Just Pearly Things gets all of her bullshit rhetoric from. There are many times on her shows where Pearl purposely misrepresents historical facts so badly that it leaves her viewers wondering, what the fuck is she talking about? In these cases, Pearl is obviously trying to push an underlining agenda, and I highly suspect that these bullshit talking points are coming from characters from the radical right, like Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro, through her handlers Kobe DeVito and Gino Bontempo. Now, let's keep moving by exploring the background of the creator of the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro. And let's see how his ideologies may be affecting the YouTube platform of Just Pearly Things. If you look on the screen now, you should see a profile summary of Ben Shapiro. That summary reads as follows. In 2016, Shapiro described himself as basically a libertarian. In 2021, he described himself as generally libertarian in regards to the role of the government and as a conservative in regards to the role of social structures. The New Yorker, HATERZ, and Vox have described Shapiro as right-wing. Shapiro's views have been described by the New York Times as extremely conservative and was described by The Economist as a radical conservative and as a classically religious conservative. A 2020 study examining issue framing by right-wing podcasts used the Ben Shapiro Show as an example, which offered a mainstream conservative perspective that favors President Donald Trump and his framing on issues like nationalism in a 2x2 matrix that also examined a Stormfront podcast, an alt-right podcast, and the Daily Standard podcast. The study showed that Shapiro's rhetoric was similar to that used in the Stormfront podcast, though with a different tone. Shapiro accuses the political left of believing in an imaginary hierarchy of victimhood in which the opinions of members of persecuted groups like the LGBT community are afforded more credence. He has argued that the left has dominated American culture through popular entertainment, media, and academia in a way that has made conservatives feel disenfranchised and helped lead to the election of Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election. He has stated that political correctness breeds insanity. Shapiro is an outspoken opponent of safe spaces, especially those on college campuses, arguing that they go against free speech. Shapiro frequently praises Western culture and Western civilization. In 2019, he said, "I believe Western civilization is superior to other civilizations." Now, these are some of his views on race. He has acknowledged that African Americans were historically victims of injustice in the United States, but does not believe in the existence of widespread systematic injustice today. In 2017, Shapiro stated that the idea that Black people in the United States are disproportionately poor because America is racist, that's just not true. Shapiro has dismissed the idea that the United States was founded on slavery and argued that America was founded in spite of slavery. Shapiro is critical of Black Lives Matter and has argued that the Black Lives Matter movement did indeed begin with protests about police brutality, but quickly morphed into broader debates over the validity of looting and rioting, tearing down historic statues, slavery reparations, and defunding the police. So you can see how Ben Shapiro's ideologies, especially those on race, can affect other YouTubers like Pearl through members of his media empire. Remember, Kobe DeVito and Gina Bontempo are not only managers, but they are also conservative journalists with years of experience in media production, which means that they are experts in creating and producing entertaining stories and narratives that have conservative slants. Kobe and Gina are both college graduates. Gina is a graduate of Harvard. Unfortunately, Pearl is not as savvy or as intelligent as her counterparts, so her delivery of their crafted talking points tend to come across as awkward and not well thought out when she speaks on them on her YouTube platform. Now, let's go ahead and move forward on what I think will happen next, now that I have officially called out Hannah Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things. Now that I've presented my findings about Hannah Pearl Davis and her management team, I'm sure there will be pushback from Pearl and her naysayers. If you look on the screen now, I have made a list of her anticipated responses with my replies to those responses. I imagine the conversation with Pearl would go a little something like this. Pearl, don't pay attention to Ebony Man 2K. He is just a small YouTuber. Ebony Man, regardless if I have 1 sub, 1,000 subs, or 1 million, I am thorough in my presentation with credible receipts. Any attempt to belittle my efforts will serve as a form of distraction. Pearl, claiming to be from Chicago when I'm not, it's really not that big of a deal. Ebony Man, Chicago is a world-renowned city with international recognition. So for you to try to claim to be from Chicago when you are not is a lame attempt to steal swag that you don't have. Pearl, just because my management is part of the conservative right doesn't mean that I am. Duh. Ebony Man, this is true, but it is plausible that your manager's connections to conservative sources on the radical right can easily serve as an influence on your topics, talking points, and choice of guests. Pearl, I don't know Ben Shapiro, never met Ben Shapiro, so why are you trying to tie me to Ben Shapiro? Ebony Man, just because you don't personally know Ben Shapiro doesn't mean you're not heavily influenced by his ideology through your handlers, Kobe and Gina. For instance, your thoughts on abortion are almost identical to Ben Shapiro's. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my presentation of the truth about Hannah Pearl Davis, aka Just Pearly Things, and her management team. I have given you receipts of Pearl's background and where she is really from. I have given you testimony of her immoral business practices from an ex-colleague. I have given you a full background report of her managers Kobe DeVito and Gina Bontempo. And lastly, I've shown how Pearl could be highly affected by the ideologies of Ben Shapiro through his media empire, The Daily Wire, from her managers Kobe and Gina. Well, all right, I hope this presentation has been informative, and feel free to share this video with others, because it is obvious that Hannah Pearl Davis is not who she claims to be, and she does not have our best interests at heart. It appears that just Pearly things is being used by the radical right to conquer and destroy people of color. This is Ebony Man 2K, the original king of receipts. Peace, and I'm out.